Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Mark live show number 396. I am your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you so much for joining us live. And if you're listening to this in Memorex, that was our topic last week, if you remember. But if not, thank you so much for listening to our re-simulcast of this on 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends. Makes it a little bit more of a friendlier time zone for most of those time zones. Although a lot of you watch us regardless of the time, 2 a.m. Malaysia. I just always blows me when I see you all joining us. Thank you so much for doing that. And then, of course, 11:30 a.m. London time for our EU and Mideast friends. To get a little bit more familiar time, which, just to give you a precursor to some things to come, coming up, we'll start doing broadcasts from Europe. We're going to be doing, starting in April, we'll be doing broadcasts live in our journeys in Europe. We have a lot of meetings and so forth we're going to, and we're going to take advantage of being over there to broadcast live from over there. So look forward to having some fun new backgrounds to us, since this is our post hurricane cleanup, but soon to be better looking background by the time all we get done. So anyways, and of course, thank you for watching us on Roku or Amazon TV or Apple TV or Google TV on our TV station, the Hospitality Channel, or if you are a more traditionalist kind of way of watching us on the variety of Facebook pages, YouTube pages, our LinkedIn page for me, which is, they allow us only one, and of course, Twitter broadcast, and Twitch. We are on Twitch for those who use PlayStations or PS5s, which are out there now, and so forth. You can watch us on that. So today's topic, a bit of a grind because of the similarities of what we've been talking to even kind of bring up to speed a little bit of what we've been talking to up to this point. Let me kind of give you the progression of things. So at the tail end of February, on our live show 394, we talked about the current state of hospitality tech stacks. We had our guest host, Mr. Edward St. Ange from Flip2, share some of the angst of the challenges and the internal struggles of getting proper tech stacks in hospitality, and how woefully behind technology-wise hospitality as an industry is. For 395, which was just last week's, we talked about, is it live or is it memory? It's the changing landscape of content authenticity, where we talked about the infusion, the rapid tsunami infusion of AI in usabilities for content generation. We've on our podcast, for those that have been following us, we've gone through the whole spectrum of AI usage content as to the authenticities of it, AI imaging content, authenticities of that, and of course the true benefit usages of AI when it comes to increasing your bandwidth capabilities and having it support a human involvement. Those have been the podcast conversations. So today, in continuance of the dialogue of things, I wanted to bring things up that are relevant to the progression of analytics. And you'll hear me talk about timelines that we are very much facing right now. So our topic today is asking the right questions, the forever changing landscape of analytics. Now, I bring this up in this context for a couple of reasons. It has been a constant concern over these many years, really, as to the real usable value of analytics from an active decision-making model. As a matter of fact, let me look back at which show we talked about the difference between reports and analytics. Show number 392. Nope. 390. We talked about reporting and analytics and the variances and the differences between those. From that, we talked about the fact that reports tend to be static. They're forensic, meaning that they look backwards as to what happened, not exactly looking forward as to what to do. There is some value proposition to what reports can be used for a forward forecasting or forward action plan. But for the most part, they refer to the past as a reference guide to future decisions. Unfortunately, they're more often regulated to did we make the report? Did it get distributed to the list of people that it's supposed to go to? And then it gets left at that. There's no real value to it. As a matter of fact, many auditing processes that we do with clients, we find that there's a lot of reports being generated that have long since to the originality of what they were intended for, how they're actually used, if they're used, and in what part of them are used. And one of the easiest auditing components that you can do for yourself, doesn't require us as a third party to come in, is look at, you're always evaluating the value proposition of your reports. Are we using it? How is it being used? who is using it and what in particular is being used. If you were to ask somebody that receives a report, one is that they want to continue to receive a report because the FOMO aspect of fear of missing out. If I don't get the report, then I don't know what is on it, so I can't contribute to that. So my value proposition diminishes. My little sandbox gets smaller. I lose a little bit of sand. So they'll always say that they want the report. But if you ask them, do you use it? The default will be, of course I do. I always look at it. Great. Then ask the next question. What do you look at? And they might point out something. They might actually look at it. They might look at certain things of it, which is what you're trying to find out. You're not trying to challenge them as to lying. You're trying to challenge them as to the value proposition of the report. What do you look on the report? Great. What does that mean to you? Tell me the interpretation of that number. If it's up, is it a good thing? Is it down? Is it a bad thing? How does that relate to what you do in your decision processes for the responsible role that you have? That's when things begin to unravel, because sometimes people will make up what they do about it. But then when you press them as to how did that affect a decision, it begins to fall apart as to it really didn't. It's an awareness, but it's not a function. And so because of that, they get into the defensive mode of, well, wait a minute now, that report needs to keep coming to me. But nobody really quantifies the efforts necessary to generate that report. I think one of the burdens of all properties is the continuous expanding pressure of report requirements on them for a variety of corporate departments asking for this revenue report, this occupancy report, this P&L report, this overall performance report, this marketing report, this. And a lot of times the data, because our tech stacks, as we talked about last week, are not connected to each other. The data has to be extracted from one platform, put into a neutral area, that then other data from another platform is put into, and the manual process of correlation is put together to report make this report. That a lot of times that gets lost for those requesting the reports. The manpower hours necessary that are squandered in generating this curiosity report, really. And also, two, nobody is actually looking at all the reports and saying, we don't need to replicate that data in that report because it's already in this report. Maybe either if we don't want the person to see all of that report over here, that we take that portion and move it over there because it's already being done for this report. So let's move that portion over there so that that's one less thing that has to be generated for that report. Nobody does that in an organizational structure. If you are, I applaud you. But I've yet to find you. Don't know where you are, but no, probably not, because you never have to ask me to come in and actually figure out how to unravel Hammurabi's knot for you. So if you're doing that, that's great. The constant evaluation of report requirements and necessity of usages and so forth. But the questions that get asked about reports, do you want the report? Yes. Do you look at the report? Sure. Those are superficial. The real questions are the drilled down questions of what is being used to the report and how. That's the key element. And at that point, you ask the more prominent question, which is, why do we have to continue this report? Is this a time, can we break it up differently? Does it even have to still exist? If so, does it still have to go to the same people? Do the same people even use it and look at it? Once that evaluates, let's get to the world of the value of the data. A lot of times, it is relied upon others to facilitate the work. Facilitate the work. And they respond with what's being asked of them, asking the right question. A lot of times the people don't know what they don't know. And I mean the people being the people requesting data and reports and information. They don't know what's available. Nobody walks up to them and says, I have a genie in the bottle. I can answer any question you have as long as I understand what you're asking. That's a key element to this. A lot of them don't know. And I can say that firsthand from being the genie in the bottle, taking on what will be GA4 coming up this July. The diversity of data, the exciting aspect of the diversity of data that we collected or using of the data. I get to go over and walk up and say, hey guys, we want to create a useful reporting process for you. One that is actionable, one that's dynamic, one that isn't a slice of life that stops at the moment you take the report, but actually a report that you engage. And what I mean by this is any report that can be PDF'd is a slice of life report. It's static. It is as it was reported, when it was reported, and it's static. A dynamic report is one that has drop downs and pivots that want to look for these dates compared to these. I want to look at these elements versus those elements. I want to look at these segmentations versus those segmentations. And that change of the report then redevelops the report so you see what it is that you're looking for. That's a dynamic report. That is not a PDF report, because unless you're just doing a screen grab going, oh my gosh, Bob, what's this number? It's not a shared by static means PDF emailed out. Here's our static weekly report on XYZ counting of beans. That's not as useful as here you can go to as a portal and look at what it is that you need. Because that's where one of the fall downs of static PDFing or static slice of life reports is that they are homogenized so they can be distributed. If I'm at a division level versus a property level versus a corporate multi-level, the information has to be burrowed into on the report. All of us get the same report, but aspects of that report are only valuable to the position role that I have. So I have to go into where I go into, and I say this, let's look at STAR reports, tab 4, shall we? And see what it is that we need for what information we need to discuss or be responsible for. That is a static report. Dynamic report is, okay, cup of coffee, keyboards, let's pull it up. Let's go to the login, look at it. This is my time that I have allotted for looking at this report, which is always running. It's always there. I can look at it at any time. So that immediately removes the burden of having it to be created and augmented and connected and everything else, because it's there for anybody to use. And being able to customize what I find interesting and basically separating the wheat from the chaff, old analogy, finding what's useful and discarding what isn't. I go to the parts that have it already set up the way I like it. So I'm looking at what I need to. So my efficiency is improved. I'm looking, I open it up. My date sequence is correct. My modifiers are what I left them as, because that's what I like looking at first. And I see what I need to see. That starts whatever it is that I'm reviewing the report for. That is incredibly more valuable. We've talked about that in previous shows. We're talking about it now only as a precursor to what's that data? What is my available data that I can put on this dashboard? And that's where we currently are, in a huge chasm of disparity between those that need the data and those are producing the data. I say this, we have incredibly talented resources that can literally answer any question asked. The probability, possibility, the collectivity of it, the presentation of it, the correlation of it. They can literally do that, but they don't know what the value of the data is, because their expertise is in the data collection and reporting and not the data usage and interpretation. So because of that, you have the ability to go over and ask what data is that you want. The data that you want is something that you need to understand what you're available to ask for. Genie in the bottle. Let's give you some examples. People that look at their site traffic, that they look at what's called vanity metrics. How many people came to the website? How many people come to the website each day? How many people of those are new visitors? How many people of those clicked on a page? How many people of those bought something? How many people looked at our ads? How many people bought something from our ads? How many people went through our social platform or whatever? These are generic vanity perspectives. And I say vanity because ask yourself, what's the action item for answering any of those questions? How many people came through our social? Organic or paid? Okay, let's divide that. How many people came through our paid social? Okay. Gives us a number. What are you going to do with a number? Is it a good number? Is it bad? Well, it's a good number if it's bigger than the number you're comparing it against. Is that period over period or year over year? Is it in comparison to other channels? Did you deplete traffic from other channels and increase it in social? What action items comes from that? From a marketer, I want to know why I had channel shift. Why is my social doing better than, say, for instance, my organic traffic to the website? But what did we do in social that caused that variance to occur? Is it the content of the post? If so, which post? And what was the content of that post? And what are the variables about that post? Was it we picked a different time of day? Did we pick a particular day differently? How do we compare to our comp set? Were we saying something that our comp set wasn't doing, or were we saying something that our comp set was doing and we just shared in the traffic? That is usable interpretation of that number. Action. What does this number mean? Boom, boom. Oftentimes, the higher in the food chain you go in an organization, the less relevant those questions come because they're really looking at somebody else to answer those questions. I noticed our social, we spent 1,000 and our ROI went down from 10 to 1 to 7 to 1. Something's wrong in Tiny Town. Why? And the biggest answer you have to give to them is to abate their concern that they're spending money less efficiently. That's their only concern. They don't really want to care unless they feel obligated that they are going to be responsible for an answer. The granular how the sausage was made as to why those happened. Also, too, in reverse, not that the person at a higher food chain level is always looking for problems, but that is their primary objective, is when things are going well and they want to share in the wealth of being a participant in that, giving them the answers as to why there was a strong success to what they were doing. Like, why did our social go up? What can we take credit for that we're doing better? And I'm not saying them being selfishly, although that usually acts out, but just in general, how are we as a business doing better because this number is coming up? What is the explanation of this? That's good use of vanity numbers, but that's surface level. This is responsive interpretation. You're still forensically looking at something. You're looking at data that has happened, change the metrics of why it happened that way, and then going back and interpreting the causation and effects of those, if even you get that far. And I'm thinking that from head nods and comments of some people that that most questions don't even go that far. It's really just a number that's acknowledged, and somebody whack-a-moles is like, why is this a problem or why is this good? And that's about as far as it gets. There's no interpretive action to it. For that reason, you need to ask more about what other data is available. In the transition right now between GA3, Google Analytics currently, Universal Analytics is more familiar name to it, and what GA4, Google Analytics version 4 will be starting rolling out in July, is a huge inversion to the question model. Let me try to explain. We've had this discussion before when we were talking about GA4 rollouts. We did this just before the change of the year and so forth. Now it's becoming very acritical. First off, if you haven't already created a GA4 account to begin to collect data, you have already lost any potential year-over-year data value propositions because it doesn't start collecting data in its format until it actually has an account to collect it for. So all of your historical data, your year-over-years and anything you can look at in comparison do not exist. You will start with we're fantastic because there's nothing to compare us to numbers. So already missed that train. We've been talking about this now for over a year at that level. But say, for instance, you have a GA4 account. The inversion of how data is used is upside down. Through all of our history, when Google first bought Universal Urchin Analytics, UA, Universal is the acronym they began to get assumed because nobody knew who Urchin was after a while. And offering all the analytics that they do is based on you deciding what you want to track and creating an event. It's session based. I follow a session. It starts at an origin, proceeds linearly, because where I go, what I do. Okay. And in that process of step 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3, 3 goes to 4, 4 goes to 5, I create events of tracking each step of that session. I, as a visitor, come to your website. That starts a session. It pings as to geographically where I am, timestamps what time I'm looking at when I came into your website. Okay. And it shows where I came from if I came from a place. Referral. Those are vanity metrics that we're very familiar with. And then in your flow of your analytics on site, it shows you what pages I looked at, the duration of where I looked, what I went from one page to the next. Those are standard defaulted session progressions. You've heard me grind an axe about third-party providers that hijack those sessions, that I may have come from an organic social of you, but then this little pop-up crap shows up, comparing rates or whatever. And as soon as that pixel fires and creates that platform said, hey, we showed you our data. So from now, this point forward, you're ours. We started a new session and we're going to take credit for anything you do from this point forward. As I used to say, and a few different of mine, Stuart Brothers says, attribution theft is real. That happens persistently. And then they beat their chest and tell you how amazing they have helped and improved your business, um, by all these things that they're now taking credit for, that they only interceded and hijacked it and said that it was now them and not whatever else that brought you to people to your website. And if you really looked at the metrics, you realize that your revenue is going down by the extra fees you're paying them, but it really didn't go up because of them. Sorry, that's my grind for the day. Regardless of this, session-based tracking, Universal Analytics currently. What you had to do was then decide what you wanted to track. And that was called an event. I want to track if they click this button, whether it be the book now button, whether it be the more information button, whatever it is. As an example, there's multiple ways to make events, but I want to track an event. Great. When they do this, what do you want to say about it? And that's your goal. I want to say that engine, that traffic, I want to measure at a value proposition that says, for 1,000 people to visit my website, 100 people book something and they generate this X amount of dollars. So if I want to set a goal that says every person is worth 1/100th of this dollar amount, then that's a goal. It's not the best goal, believe me. That's artificial. And agencies do that. Another axe to grind. Agencies will artificially create numbers to show their implied value metrics. Full of holes. Tell I shoot at people a lot. Anyways, that's how it works. Sessions are linear, progressive. Events are defined, goal. Okay. And sessions can be hijacked. Then we have attribution problems. We got taken away a long time ago, keywords and so forth. We were given attribution strings. The attribution string is the progression that Google tells you was the most successful production of engagement with your website. It'll say, if it's not been hijacked by somebody, even if it is, it'll still show it in there, that of them, not where it originally came from, that says, hey, these people went to your website, then they went to your social, they came from social, then they hit a paid campaign, they came back to your website, and they eventually went to your book engine. That's an attribution string, and they give you an attribution number, and they rank it from the best ones down to the least ones. Problem is, the attribution mostly is associated with what's called last click attribution. What was the last thing they did before they went over and bought something from you? And that the last click attribution has been tremendously exploited by the people that take credit for it. Look at us, which is where these third parties come in. They hijack your session. The person purchases something. They say they did it. Nope. They hijacked it, took credit for it. With that comes a problem. Well, what about all the other things that were touched? Well, then we've all come up with some hybrid variations. Google started offering variations as to how you want to interpret the data. My favorites are frequency and time decay. What do I mean by both of those? Frequency is if they went back and forth to my social several times in the process of them purchasing, I want to assign good value to my social campaign as being a strong contributor to that conversion. They went to my social enough a few times frequency-wise. So because of that, I have more of a value proposition what I'm doing on social. Time decay. Well, maybe they hit social very early on and they didn't hit it again for a long period of time. So that value proposition really went down. They were doing other things. They were going to my website. They were going to my paid ads. They were doing other stuff. So that social, however valuable at the beginning, slowly diminishes its value because it was never used again. Okay. So that means its contribution to the attribution of that is lesser because it didn't happen over as much towards the end over time. I like putting the two together, really. The idea for why we even ask those questions is to know where to spend money. If a platform, if social is doing well for us, but it's not a direct channel, meaning it's not the last click, it's not the place that they came from to go buy something, we tend to discount it. How many arguments have you had about social media where you're defending the budget and was like, well, I look at this and we're not getting a very good ROI and we're spending this much money, but it's not showing that it's generating that much money. And I talk about the electric guitar theory. The electric guitar sounds terrible until you plug in an amplifier. The amplifier is social media. It amplifies what you're doing by doing it, by plugging it in. So you want that attribution value. Well, here's a switch. We've been talking about using Universal Analytics in our definitions of all this. This is how things are currently going on right now. GA4 is the inversion of that. It's not about tracking single session, following me through a progression. It's about tracking everything and then defining me. What do I mean by this? I mean that all of the buttons that get touched are tracked. All of the things that happen get tracked. It's defining what you're wanting to know about in connection to what else you want to know about. And these are called dimensions, data dimensions, that create the insights. This is where we get to the juxtaposition of our topic today, asking the right questions. The people that need the data don't know this. They don't know the change of this. If they are fluent in what we just talked about with Universal Analytics, I want to track people hitting our booking engine on our accommodations page. Okay, that's tracking sessions. I'm going to track people that come to our website when they go to the accommodations page and hit our book now button. That is my event and my goal track, and that will create a report for me in the sense of this is the result of your tracking of these people. These many people went to your accommodations page and hit this book now button. Okay, hopefully for a good reason you're tracking that. And of course, if you have e-com funnel tracking, which if you are with a brand, sorry, you don't, then you can find out how much of that traffic generated what money, because then your tracking is in the e-com funnel, okay, where you're tracking the high and here's the rates and this and confirmation pages, and it takes the revenue off of it and says, okay, through this event goal that you've tracked, accommodations page, book engine, this is the dollars that generated from that button. People going to the accommodation page, hitting that button, this is how much money there is. That's the world that exists now. And that's the world that, for those even fluent in knowing this, ask the question. So how are we doing for our web development, our web capabilities? Which pages are producing the most revenue? That's where these one questions come from, okay? GA4 is about, wow, we hadn't, oh, by the way, with the sessions and doing that, as soon as you set it up, that's when you start tracking that data. So if you wanted to currently right now know the history of people going to the accommodations page and hitting the book now button, how much revenue they generated, you wouldn't, because it only starts from once you create it. GA4 data dimensions. This stuff is already tracking. And then you have a amazing brain thought. Go, oh, I got an idea. Let's track how many people, what kind of money we're making off of the book now button off the accommodations page. Let's look at all of the book now buttons on all of our different pages and see which page is producing the most revenue if we wanted to know what each ones we're doing. Right now, you'd have to set up event goals for all of those. Okay, go through wherever the book now button is and create event goal combinations for all those. So I got a hair that keeps going by. In GA4 coming up, which you can start right now, but July, you're going to be having to use GA4. You can go over and say, wait a minute, this would be an interesting thing. Let's go and look and ask, hey, all these book now buttons, which page is producing what revenue? And GA4 can immediately give you all the data it knows, not just from that moment forward, but it can go backwards immediately and tell you this is historically what's been going on. And you can segment it out to, your time frames, platforms, devices, your contribution channels, all that kind of stuff. You can get more and more specific. A lot of people don't know to ask this question or any questions like this. They don't realize that this is the fundamental change in how analytics are going to be moving forward. Matter of fact, most of them don't even know that come this July, their Universal Analytics goes dark. At first, it was just they weren't going to support Universal Analytics. But if you have had any access to your GA accounts, you see this huge banner on the top. If you haven't had GA4 already configured to it, this account will go dormant as of July. Your data will get lost. You need a GA4 account. Click here for us, and we'll create a GA4 account for you. Should you not have created one? First off, don't do that because their base platform painfully remiss in tracking anything of value. It will put you back even farther worse because it's not going to track anything. If you had any events and goals set up, those don't transfer over. They're not in the same modality. Sessions versus data dimensions don't match. So if you think, well, that's no problem, they're just going to move over everything I'm doing in Universal Analytics to GA4. No, they're not. It's just going to turn GA4 with a certain standard triggers, traffic, where they come from, the typical stuff that defaults and starts. So it's not going to do you any good. And you have to still go in funnel and create all the tracking that you need to do all this. So you need your GA4 set up correctly now, and you definitely need it by July. A lot of people are going to get into a lot of trouble because they're not paying attention to this. And then one day they're going to go log in because they have to, and they're going to find out that the world's changed. But the key element to our discussion today is the fundamental shift in asking the right questions of your data. The ability to track data and define what you want tracked in data is amazing. So I want to give you two primary examples of GA4's transition. One I've already given you about reports. Reports can instantaneously be thrown back historically for all the times you have data. Keep in mind a couple of things that if you're used to Universal Analytics, that it's there back as many years as you've started tracking, that's great. That isn't how the world's going to work next forward. Because everything is now being tracked all at once, the data is exponentially larger than what Google has been tracking for you before. Reason you get 14 months of data and then it just starts falling off, first in, first out. So anything older than 14 months drops off. So you'll be able to look, if you have already started one, at least by this time last year over year data. But 2 months from now, you'll lose February. And so it'll progress. So you have to set up your own storage, which at first there's a free amount with Google's version of storage called BigQuery. And eventually you'll have to start paying for each terabyte, usually around $5 a terabyte for data, so you can have longer history for yourself. I would recommend, just in general for now, plan on storing, depending upon how much data you're collecting from the volume of traffic, it's all correlated to the amount of traffic your website is generating, that you would want at least 3 years worth of historical data. Why do I say that? From a marketing perspective, I want to do average weighted mean value propositions. Everybody looks at it over year and year, and they just take one period of time and compare those numbers to your numbers. And they're artificially, it's a black and white contrast where you need depth of tone. You need to have, especially with our history of business, Dave, 2020 was a shutdown, 2021 was a lockdown, 2022 was a tsunami wave business cycle, and 2023 hopefully is a more standardized business cycle process with the changes that have been inflicted on us for the past 3 years, 2 years, 3-ish. So I would want to distribute our data collection to linger for 3 years, because if you're just now starting it, you're going to want more than just year over year data. You're going to want year over year data. And to have good statistical relevance of the confidence factors that you're using the data for, year to year data would be useful. So my recommendation is that. So for BigQuery, paying for that additional data storage to retain that kind of level of data amount is there. So going back to the reporting process, I have a question. Hey, I never thought of this, but what if we tracked this to this to this to this? What would that tell us? Does that give us our answer to the question we should be asking? And now with GA4, you can literally hit the report and boom, you have contrast of data historically going back to see basically an answer to your question from all of the data it has accumulated up to that point and moving forward, which is brilliant. GA4 didn't do that. Now, for the other incredible aspect of GA4 is custom audiences. And that's one thing that has never really been fully utilized in Universal Analytics. And I strongly recommend this is one of the carryovers of things that you should already be doing. And I'll explain some examples of how good this can be for you. Custom audiences are saying, hey, I want to keep track of people that did this, went to our booking engine, but didn't buy for the past 30 days. Because I want that audience, because I want to take that audience and use it as a custom audience. Remember, this isn't sending them emails. This isn't knowing them as an individual. This is just their usage in relationship to you and defining them as a category that Google knows who they are in that sense to use them for your marketing. But then you want to use that custom audience in your marketing campaigns. In particular, of that example would be for your retargeting. If somebody looked at you in 30 days and, maybe you wanted them, people that looked at your accommodations page, looked at your events page, and then went to your booking engine, but didn't book for the past 30 days, then I would say, okay, let's put them in a retargeting program to show up more often with things that are happening, because you can also track the dates that they're looking for, maybe feature things that are incentives of why they might have been looking for you, and have a retargeting campaign that says, hey, don't miss out. Our rates are about to go up, or we're offering a special 10% more for the next, whatever the windows are. And you get the retargeting, so you're improving their conversion value. Those custom audience creations are profoundly powerful. It goes from doing your standard happy-go-lucky, whoever shows up, hopefully 1.8%, 2.2% of those people actually buy something, maybe 3 if you're really good, okay? From my website, to 8, 9, 11% conversions, because you're now talking to people that have already been specifically interested in something that you've defined, and you're sharing better data with them in your advertisement. You're incentivizing them, you're value propositioning them, you're clarifying them, you're giving them more content relevancy. All marketing successful. Sorry, I should do it this way. When I drink coffee, I drink hospitality marketing coffee. Anyways, so thank you. I should be in coffee with you. All right. So I love coffee. With that, reports or custom audiences work the same. It won't start generating a custom report until you define a custom audience until you define the audience. So for those, the sooner you start building an audience, the sooner you start collecting the data to a critical statistical level that Google can use for you to use in your marketing. You just can't do it on a party of 10. That creates an isolation capability, and that creates identifying capability, which is creating a data security issue. So you need thousands, okay, a couple thousands usually, in audience build to begin to use it as a marketing campaign that Google does say, hey, sorry, this audience isn't big enough to use yet. And then from that, you need to slice them up into geographies and other filterable variables in your ads. The key element to it is that it was created for the fact that these people hit your site, didn't buy something past 30 days. That means they're already interested enough to have looked at you to that level. You should go back and collect with them. That custom audience value is there. We do that in metasearch all the time. Dean Schmidt, my compatriot in crime when it comes to metasearch, one of them, he's the one that came up with that custom audience. We use it consistently. The conversion value of it in metasearch is massive in comparison. So anyways, that is standard 2 that GA4 will give you that ability. You define a custom audience moving forward to develop the custom audience for, but reportings can happen at any time and go backwards as far as you have data. The other aspect of this is that there's so much data that you can choose from at this point. Taking case, and I'll make this as a fun example that it's probably more advanced discussion as to how to use this data, but to show you the granularity of the data is why I'm saying this. So when somebody goes to your booking engine, they're presented all the variables of your inventory type based on the dates that they're selecting, okay? And of course, all of the rate options available to those room types. But what also gets shown in most booking engines is the residual in the back of the house. You don't see it in front, but in the back of the house in the data. In order to show the room, it has to query whether the room type is available to display for the dates that have been queried. That data comes through in the display of that data. So when I'm going to a particular property, let's say, and I'm looking for particular dates, and I didn't assign necessarily room type at that point, or maybe even if I did, it'll say, for instance, I pick a king, okay? It'll show me all the rate variables that are applicable to the king type rooms that you have. And I'm sure you have variances of them, whether it's beach view or non-beach view or mountain view versus non-mountain view or suite versus non-suite, adjoining versus non-adjoining, whatever it is. All of those variations come through with all the variation prices for it. It also, in the back of the house data, shows how much of that inventory is still available for it to have been queried and shown in the result. So from a granular level, I could ask a silly question of, so for everybody that's looking for a king, what rates show up the most? What inventory is available for those rates when they show up? And how often do they get picked? Now, why would that be a question to ask? Well, honestly, there's 3 ways of using that data, but let's just pick one. And that is, I need to show if inventory availability is a resistance issue for acquisition. If it showed up, and it showed up for a rate or didn't show up for a rate, if it showed up and didn't have inventory or it didn't show up, or if it showed up and had rate and inventory, is the rate viable? Is the inventory viable? Is it a room type that's viable that we are not able to sell the room without changing the rate or demand to the occupancy or the ADR? And that determines what we should do about the fact that, and I'll say this as an example, families don't rent king rooms that much unless there's an adjoining room that isn't a king, or if it is, at least it's some that they need 2 rooms. Mom and dad stay in the king, but the kids, unless of course they're of a certain age group, below 5 and 6, then having the child in the bed with the parents is not really a worry. They don't need a second bedroom, nor would they want a second bedroom for a child. But anything above age of 9, often they get, the fact that they're old enough to have a separate room, especially if they have siblings. All of that is implication data, meaning if they're booking 2 rooms, got 2 rooms, one is a king or not, and they have kids or they indicate that they're having kids, because that's, remember, the data field that's also in there, we can then already make an assumption, for the most part, always variable, that If they got a king and they indicate they have a child, then the child is below 7 years old or 6 years old, roughly, and that they're going to sleep with the parents. And so we have a sense of what it is they need. So we can create more content about them as a family traveling, give them more relevancy to traveling, especially if they didn't buy anything with us, right? Then we know that we can add that type of content in the retargeting campaign for them. By the same token, if they're looking for doubles only and or suites and pull-out beds and so forth, then we can know by their indication of children or not children that they have demand need because the children aren't sleeping with the parents. So either they need a second bedroom or a room big enough that they can have a separate sleeping for the kids and so forth. These are all means of determining content value for us to pursue them future, especially if they didn't book at the time when they first were presented this data. We can also see whether or not occupancy is a resistance factor. But rate is occupancy is a resistance factor, and see what it is they're looking for, and also correlate that to any event of particularity to the dates that they were looking for, because usually you frame out your dates to, if you're going there for a reason, what you're looking for to go to. Okay. And whether that has a correlation to the fact that they're bringing their kids to a concert, or that their event is related to families or not related to families. Obviously, and this is every revenue manager's bread and butter. If I have an adult event, my kings are going to be probably the higher demand room type, because they're not bringing kids and it's an adult event, and they're probably the first selection of choice that those people want. If they're doing doubles, you're looking at multi-occupancy. If they're looking at any room available, then they're looking at the rate availability. So they're rate tolerant. If you're at an 80% occupancy or 85% occupancy and you're beginning to have high rate yield, it's not the rate that's the driver. It might be the inventory type. If your doubles or your kings aren't showing up corresponding to the type of demographics you have coming in, then it's an inventory issue. How can you solidify that? Do you have to feature your doubles because you don't have kings? How do you equate that for people that are traveling for the event and so forth? This is the strategy of marketing with revenue managers. If this sounds like a lot of rambling, my apologies, because this is a rather granular conversation about data that most people don't know exist, and certainly not existed in a way of formatting that can be put into a report board for evaluation. What's the correlation factors of these? Is there a correlation at all, a causation correlation between the data that we're collecting and the resultants that we're looking for? It's one thing to see, it's another thing to imply, it's another thing to validate, and it's another to validate by confidence. Confidence meaning that most likely this variable does influence this variable at this level of confidence. And what I mean by confidence is the probability of something happening. Very few things are certain in the world, and we can always go through the analogies of what those are. Most everything else has a degree of confidence. When you start creating math, you have the probability factor of what the effects are. Those probability factors are determined based on the correlation values that are represented. If it gets cloudy, there's a high confidence that can rain. Not always. Maybe it snows. Maybe it doesn't rain at all. It's the type of rain. It's the type of clouds, what have you. But the correlation of those two simple variables, clouds produce rain, usually the case. It's not perfect and it's not 100%, but the high correlation exists there. To give you an example, when we first started doing data, I had a really fun data analysis person, not a hospitality person. And we started feeding, and we were playing with Watson at the time, IBM's Watson. That AI was impressive. And we're feeding data into it, and he comes running in, telling me, Lauren, I found my first high confidence correlation, 95% correlation. I'm like, wow, that's means it's almost certainty, really. He says, yeah, the more people stay with us at the hotel, the more money we make. Yeah, thank you. We call that Captain Obvious now, but yes, back at the time, because he didn't really see what he was looking at, which was, yes, of course, length of stay means they have to pay for more nights. So obviously the correlation of somebody staying more nights with us means we're making more money with them. That kind of matter-of-fact correlation, it wasn't 100%, because that's not always the case. They could be comps, there could be other things. So there's always a variation to it. But when you start getting into the 90 percentile of correlation confidence, the likelihood is it's more likely than not they cause and effect relationship. But this is how you look at data. And the fact that we're going to have all these variables of how to ask the right question for data is impressively exciting, because now it's about what to ask. I don't know if you're iRobot, the movie with Will Smith in it, where he had the little disc hologram from the professor that, and he could ask questions, but he had to ask the right question. And that's what you're faced with, is that you can ask questions and you'll get the very much factual answer. But if you're not asking the right questions, then you're not getting the true depth of the data's value by asking the right questions. The right questions come from, why didn't they book? It's a great right question. How do you answer it? Well, let's look at a particular frame of time or frame of reference. Doesn't even have to be time, but frame of reference as to who did book and who didn't. Let's take away the people who did book for now. Not that we're ignoring them, because we might go back and try to see if there's a difference in variation of what they did versus the set that we're looking at. Let's look at the people that didn't book. What did they do? Okay. Here's the correlations of what they did, where they came from, what time of day they may have been booking, all the data that's available. We get to look at it instantaneously with GA4. What time of day were they looking? What platform? What device were they looking on? What geographic location? What demographies do we know about them? Behaviorally, their pattern of engagement with our site. All these types of things are variables of opportunity that we can look at and see what wheat from the chaff. Does this make sense that this is related to this or not? It's not that it's unrelated completely, because it's a factor of data that we have, but how much weight relevance is on there has to be determined as to whether it's included in the decision. Paralysis of analysis. Don't want to get to where you're having too many variables that you can't figure out the correlations that are having the greatest impact. You have to deterministically create thresholds, force rankings that say these are irrelevant for the purpose of what we're looking for. These are low relevancy for the purpose we're looking for. These are moderate relevancy, high relevancy, and then factuals. Factuals being the most correlated ones that we have. Once we get to the correlations, we start looking at the variance. We start from the top down. Once we've determined the highest level of correlations, we then go to the relevancies below to see how much of those little things impacted. Case in point, in creating custom audiences for a membership group for a very high-end prestige club years ago, we were tasked with the ability of creating a summertime membership program that was not cheap. It was, tens of thousands of dollars to join. It was thousands of dollars a month in commitment of spend. So this was for the high affluence income people that could afford this, that would take advantage of it, what have you. It was located in Florida. And, the first thoughts that come to your head about how we're going to improve a high-end membership to a exclusive club for a 3-month period is, what other clubs are we looking at? Let's go see if we can ride their terms. Well, that doesn't work, because it's very expensive to be somebody that you're not using their keywords, and of course it's also highly offensive and something they can do a cease and desist and saying you can't use our keywords of our name or anything because you're not us and you're infringing our trademark. So you look at the words that they're using, you pattern, but you're already using them. You're already having those membership club keywords and things and terms and so forth. So now you're into the demographics of people. Well, at that caliber, what kind of cars did they drive? Mercedes-Benz, Bentleys, Maseratis, whatever. What other things would they be doing as a people of that level? Well, they go to other clubs. Okay, yeah, we knew that part. They follow other things. Do they have private jets? Do they fly private jets? What kind of private jets? It turns out that for this private summertime club, which was mainly golf and spa and beach and so forth, that people that flew in G4s, not G5s or G3s, because there was a particular brand variance of G4, that drove Mercedes-Benz SLs of a high level, I think it was whatever it was, in the Atlanta area, that went to tennis tournaments, were our most productive audience. That's pretty granular. And it's a small group, but that group sustained the campaign to hit our goal for who we were looking for memberships for summer. We only needed 100 of them. So that ability to grind into the data and find those correlations is a lot of how you set up ad campaigns. Even you start with a variety of ad campaigns, a variety of filtered sets to see what variations work and don't work. You cut the chaff away, meaning the ones that are staying below your threshold of KPIs, and then reinvest those monies saved from it into the larger pool of ones that are being successful. See if it amplifies their revenue development. Cut those out that fall below that threshold, so you're left with a crucible amount of ad campaigns that are targeted to the people most resonant to your messaging, and that are yielding the best KPI for you. That's what you do in ad campaigns. You do the same in your data decisions. Let's look at the entire data. Let's correlate that to what we think is related to each other with high confidence down to low confidence. Let's decide how those correlations are created, what confidence factors exist, what are the influencing factors, can we modify those factors, and this is the way to influence the people that are engaged with it. It's a process. So asking the right questions of your data are key and paramount to the successful usage, and we are in the world of transition for that now. We are in a place where we can ask those questions retroactively. With GA4, we'll be able to go and say, I just thought of this, but when looking at this data, I wonder if they go here, do this, do that, do this, and produce, and we can literally put that together, and boom, we have data that says validates our question, or it doesn't validate our question. So it's a critical time now for the people that are in the decision mode to know that there's an expansion of questions to ask, the right questions to ask, that the data availability is there. It is on all of us as vendors, third-party people, internal people handling the analytics and the data to know that we are tasked with making sure those people are aware of what they now have available to them so that they can think from their perspective what they need to know. Just like my data person that works with me is like, they can make any of this work, but why are you asking the question? You have to have the idea of what you want the answer of to ask the right question to know the modality to get to that point. It's a key element to this. So again, our topic today is asking the right questions, the forever changing landscape of analytics. The sad part is that we are in a point where people have been kind of down to simplicities and have lost touch with what the data could provide them, and that needs to change. So for that, we will be going into a little bit more on data reporting, platform for reporting in our podcast today. As always, we try to keep it symbiotic to our live show. We'll go through some of the tools that we use for the creation of reporting and the usabilities of it. For those unfamiliar with Google Data Studio is now called Looker. Had that conversation a few weeks ago. Again and again, I still get used to calling it that, which is a very easy tool to use with Google's data acquisition. Obviously, because they build everything together, this works with what they've built. There are other BI tools that are out there that are more robust into the variations of data that they can collect and accumulate and so forth. We'll talk about more of those BI tools today in our podcast as well. So if you'd like to join us over in the podcast, it's an audio only. It's a lot shorter than our live show. It only runs 20 to 30 minutes. We talk about tools, the techniques for using the tools, recap this show, which will cap a few of the items that we talked about, and a couple of newsworthy items and so forth that have hit the board for this week that affect your hospitality business. So with that, thank you for the privilege of your time. For those joining us on TV, Roku, LinkedIn, Google, Amazon, with the Hospitality Channel, thank you so much. For those joining us on our social media platforms, simulcasting, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, thank you so much. For those that watch us on replay, when we rebroadcast 11:30 Sydney time, AM Wednesdays, and 11:30 AM Wednesdays, London time, thank you so much. You can always give me your feedback and comments. You can do that audibly as well. You can give us suggestions and topics you'd like to join in, or if you'd even like to join the show, you're more than welcome to go over and solicit us to join the show with us. For that, you can go to hdm.news/talkback. That is our podcast enhancement where you literally hit a microphone, talk to me, tell me if I can use your name, use what you said, or just refer to it. You give us permissions based to it, but you can join the show. You can add comments to it. For all of our I Love Lucy reruns of the live show, we've been every week now we're in our 9th year. Our podcast has been 17 years long, but primarily every week for the past 9 years as well. You can go to hospitalitychannel.tv. You can look it up by topic, date of broadcast, and or co-host. So you can look at any of those. And it's forever in I Love Lucy reruns. It constantly plays. We literally have 2 months of nonstop. If you need to go to sleep at any time, just put the channel on. Now we have 2 months worth of perpetual content if you add it all together over the 9 years. It's amazing. We've had, we culled our show down to 1 hour these past 2 years. It used to be 2 hours, 2 hours plus sometimes, as we have many more talking heads and co-hosts and so forth in the process. For our podcast, you can find it on 39 different platforms, iTunes, iHeart. You can go to Amazon's Alexa, Siri, and Google Assistant and simply ask them to play the Hospitality Marketing Podcast, and we play. As a matter of fact, a lot of people listen to our podcast on Amazon, which is really neat, Alexa. So anyway, with that, again, Loren Gray, thank you for the privilege of your time. We'll talk to you next week on show number 397. Getting close to that 400 mark. We should be doing that actually in Europe. So we'll have show 400 in somewhere in the Netherlands, just so you know. Again, thank you for the privilege of your time. And I look forward to talking to you all next week.